Oh, we're praying on this one.
All right.
I think
Yep, it's up going.
it's up and running.
Perfect. Okay.
Good afternoon. This is the diocesan panel discussion, Repairing the Beach, Reparations as Healing with Dr. Catherine Meeks of the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing. We're still gathering right here, so you're going to hear some ambient noise, but we'll get started with the proper panel discussion and the keynote address from Dr. Meeks in just a few minutes. Thank you so much for joining us today. No, come on. Hi.
It's okay, wait, he is totally working.
Yeah. No, go ahead. What's up?
I just want to say hi. You don't know me,
Okay.
but I admire you. Peter Shedley, I've seen you on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming today. I'm really glad you made it out. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, that's so good. Welcome everyone to tonight's evening with Dr. Catherine Meeks. I'm so glad that y'all are here. I am Hazel Monet, and it has been an honor to serve as the Commissioner for Equity and Justice in the Diocese of Washington. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. Thank you for wearing masks. Our panelists will keep their masks off so that they can begin conversation. We need the restrooms, they are behind you. There's one with powder tea right behind you. There's one past the fan, and there's one here to your right. There's also water in the back if you would like that. Before we dive into introductions, I would love to invite up Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, Bishop Mary Lane, to say a word of welcome and invite us into prayer.
Thank you, Hazel. We'll say goodbye till later, but give you a round of thanks for Hazel Grove, who's come to my pleasure to be among those welcome to you here today, and welcome our speakers and guests. We are we're in for a real treat, and it's wonderful to be here with all of you. Thank you, Calvary, for your hospitality as always. Will you join me in a moment of stillness? First of God, we are here in this place, mindful of all those who have walked this land, worked the land, built the houses, built the buildings, labored, laughed, cried, were born and died. All those who have gone before us. And in part, we're here because we are trying to understand our responsibilities and your vision for how we might weave together past, present, and future, standing where we are, casting our gaze where you would have us be, how we might lead the heritage. Thank you for bringing us here. Thank you for those who are our panelists as we bless them. Give them your words to speak and give us your ears to listen and to engage. May this be one small step on the journey we are called to walk.
In Jesus' name, we pray. So you are here tonight, I'm assuming, because you are interested in this conversation. If at the very least, you're like, what is reparations? What is the Episcopal Church talking about? All the way to, yes, when is it going to happen? And everything in between. So wherever you are on that journey in this conversation, you're welcome here. We're so glad you have joined us. Want to introduce the folks that you see here on stage. Right here is the Reverend Peter Jerchell. He is the rector of this lovely parish here, Calvary Episcopal Church. He's the chair of the Reparations Task Force in our diocese, and the author of In My Skin, Seeing My Skin. I have it here written down, so I'll just like follow that. Seeing My Skin, a story wrestling with whiteness. Peter brings a deep commitment to community and transformation, and we're so glad. Next, we have Reverend Dr. Julianne N. Robertson, Esquire. She is an interfaith minister, a spiritual counselor, and an attorney in the District of Columbia. She's a strategist, so brings all of that energy into what I'm sure you'll hear presented in today's conversation, but also brings that to promoting her values of community, of compassion, of truth-telling, of unconditional love. So welcome to today's conversation. Glad to have you. I'm going to introduce you in a second, because you're going to go over that. I'm going to introduce you all now to hear Reverend Gail Fisher-Stewart, who is a priest and chaplain and counselor in our diocese. Reverend Gail Fisher-Stewart has been involved in so much of justice work within and outside of the church, and is the author of a few things. One is the Preaching Black Lives Matters, and most recently, a book called Black Episcopal, right? So wherever you buy books, wherever you buy books. And so we are in for a treat. We are with folks who are not only educators and activists, but folks who are bringing theology to this conversation of reparations. So we're really grateful to have you all here in conversation with Dr. Catherine Weeks, who is our esteemed guest for today, and will be with the diocese for a few days. So if you're in the area and want to be a part of our Monday conversation, honest to God, you're welcome to join that as well. But a little bit more about our esteemed guest today. Dr. Weeks is the executive director of the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing in Atlanta. That center really focuses on engaging folks to dismantle racism within themselves, within their congregations, within their communities. Dr. Weeks brings 4 decades of experience to this work of transforming the system, transforming our hearts, transforming our church, and really focusing on those in the margins and bringing them to the center. And so you'll get a chance to hear a lot of that today. Dr. Weeks does this work from her understanding and call as this is a vocation. So this is not like a job she goes to. This is her life and heart's work that God has called her to. And we are blessed because of it. So with that, we're so glad to welcome you here to share some thoughts. Welcome, Dr. Weeks. I think it's on. You folks here, Dr. Weeks. Yes, we'll share some lights. I'll figure it out.
This was,
Here we go.
so it's an honor to be here, and I've worked with Hazel and Bishop Marianne online, and so it feels like I know them already, though I'm meeting them for the first time today. So it's, I think it's one of maybe the blessing and curse of online. I think you know people that you haven't ever met yet, because you see them so much. I bring you greetings from the Diocese of Atlanta, from Bishop Robert Wright, and the 50-something plus thousands Indians in our diocese, which includes a lot of different kinds of people, but it also includes a bunch of feisty seniors, as Bishop Wright is likely to say when he's talking about us, and I'm one of those feisty seniors. So glad to be out and about 6 weeks out from second hip joint replacement, so I'm dialing. And a biological who's free of pain.
Yes, amen.
Been fighting for about the last 4 years. So, not so long ago, I wrote a blog called Can We Have a Minute? And it was an imaginary letter from Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, talking to white people in particular, but all of us in a more general way, asking the question, what would you have, what other privileged position on the planet would you have been willing to let go of in order to make sure that our lives can be saved? What are the privilege? What are the things that, we can hold on to because of our privileges? And all of us have some kind of privilege. None of us are here living under the bridge. So sometimes I think we lose sight of that. Some folks are certainly more privileged than others in this country. And white people are more privileged from having white skin than people of color. But, I sit here with a PhD from Emory. I am not going to argue that I don't have privilege. That would be a dumb discussion, I think. Though I think sometimes we get caught in that place. And so because we have privilege, we are all very much called to pay attention to interrogate how we allow our wanting to hold on to that to determine how radical we are about what needs to happen to make the world a better place. Because every one of us has got some place where we need to say, what am I willing to let go of here? In terms of identity, in terms of position, in terms of the ways we look at ourselves, in terms of the way other people see us. All of that has to do with reparations, because reparations happens to be about fixing the mess that's been made. It's not about, one simple little thing you get to go do, and then you can go home and say, oh, well, we've done that now. I actually am coming to this discussion after many years of refusing to be in it, because when people started out talking to me about it in terms of how we're going to figure out what we owe to Native people and Black people and get the money, I'm thinking, you're not ready to have the discussion. You're not ready yet, because what is required is a willingness to lament about what we have done as a people, as a nation. We've stolen the land of our Native people, we've stolen the lives of African Americans, and there's, we need to lament that ways. And we, all of us, Black, brown, white, need to lament about all of it. We don't need to pick the part we want to feel the best about. We need to be in lament about it all. But lamenting is fine and necessary and honorable, and when you get to do it, you need to do it with as wholeheartedly as possible, and then you need to get on with it. Because we can camp out and lament so long until we actually think we did something. We're good at that, actually. I mean, we can give you a litany of reasons why things ought to be what they ought to be. And that's good. I think some days you just need to have a big party or whatever, Richard Mountain party or whatever you want to call it. And then there needs to be serious apology and penitence that's put out into this whole mix of what we have done as a nation and our own complicity with keeping what's been done intact. Because a lot of stuff continues to be done in our names, and we can speak up about it in way different ways. If we can get outside of being concerned about protecting our privilege. So you see, reparations you can get caught up in the language, the definitions, the conversation, the rhetoric. But I want to say, let's do first things first. So let's interrogate ourselves. Let's see where we are. Where do I stand? What am I willing to give up? How am I willing to be engaged in this whole thing? And what sacrifices am I willing to make? I think for there to be really true reparations in this country, most of us aren't ready to go there. Most of us are not. Even those of us that want things to be made right. Because it means a radical reconstruction of the ways in which we've decided to do things. It means reimagination. One of the things we talk about a lot in the Diocese of Atlanta is reimagining policing, because we're trying to think about how to do some of that work. So reimagining how things are constructed and being willing to do whatever it takes to create a space in this whole country where everybody has access to what they need and everybody has a chance to be who God put them on the earth to be. To let go of the power that we think we have to have in order to keep us in the places we want to stay in is a part of what it means to do the repairing work that needs to be done. So each of us needs to ask ourselves, when we pass by the person standing on the corner asking us for to help me buy dinner or buy liquor or buy whatever, how do we see them? How do we feel about them? What is our judgment of them? Because we do have responses to those. Part of the ways in which we respond to the least of these, anywhere we see them, has everything to do with the way we respond to the whole. You don't need to just be this person that goes out here and can see people in varying levels of struggle and have a set of attitudes about them that say, why don't they do better, or they could do better, or blah, 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 and then say, oh, but we need to have reparations. Do you understand? Do you understand these connections? Because what I want to talk about is the lack of intention, the lack of spirit, the lack of will. That is our biggest problem everywhere on the planet, in the church, out of the church, everywhere across this country. Our biggest problem is not that we don't know or that we don't have the resources, it's that we don't care. We don't have the intention. We don't have the will. So if we're going to lament and apologize and reimagine and then work at repairing the breach, repairing that space, repairing the distance that we've created by the ways in which we've constructed everything, then what is that going to look like? And how are we going to get there? It's not about sentimentality, it's not about rhetoric, it's not about much of anything except deep self-interrogation. And asking the hard question, what am I willing to do to make this possible? What do I hold in my hands that make me feel good and powerful and okay, that I would be willing to let go of if somebody else is it better? Where am I on that continuum? And to bring that kind of radical interrogation of ourselves and to our collective gatherings and challenge everybody who wants to be in this conversation to be in it that way. Oh, does it have anything to do with money? That's a lot to do with money. But what does it have to do with trying to find out that if my great-grandfather was a slave, you're going to give me some dollars now to compensate? So what are you going to give me? And how are you going to decide what to give me? My brother died when he was 12 because white folks in a white hospital in Elmira, Arkansas, wouldn't allow him to be treated there for appendicitis. My father was an illiterate, or I like to say unlettered sharecropper, who lived for the rest of his life with post-traumatic stress because my brother, he couldn't stay with my brother. My father and my brother were descendants of people whose lives and liberty were taken. I am also a descendant of those people. So exactly how much money do you want to give me to fix that? Think about it. So don't think that that's going to be the answer to fixing it. You see, what I want fixed is that by the time we get out of this meeting today, there will be people who have died in this city and in cities across this country because they didn't get medical care. People of color, descendants of Native peoples and Black people. So I want you to think about how we fix that. And until we get into that discussion, we're sort of playing a game with ourselves. We're sort of looking for how can we feel better? How can we look better? How can we sound better? How can we look like we're really on the way somewhere? When actually, we're just, in the first place, just talking to the top of our hats because we don't intend to give anybody any money anyway. You know, we can have that discussion forever because the reason why I used to refuse to be in it was because it always degenerated into, well, how are we gonna work that out? Well, you don't need to be talking about working out because you don't intend to do it. Otherwise, you would have started in another place, right? You would have started with, how can we make sure that every little child that's going to school is getting the same quality of education all the way across every district and every city across this country? And how can we, people of faith, say, we won't tolerate poor schools for Black and poor kids and better schools for white kids? We won't tolerate it, we won't have it. This is the kind of reimagination that has to happen. So while we're engaging in these conversations, let's not forget what the real conversation needs to be. How can we create new structures? Do you want a new constitution? We need one. Are you ready for things to be turned upside down? We need to do that. And I think maybe we're gonna get more of it than we wish because things are such a mess. And we spend a lot of time lamenting about the mess. But in some ways, I'm not as concerned about the mess as I am about will we pay attention to what the mess is inviting us into. As we get more and more into political disrepair and more into being distressed, we need to maybe lament a little bit about that and then get up and say, but then what is God asking of us in the middle of this mess? You know, a few days ago, another deranged young white man went out and did the work of his fathers and his grandfathers, because that's really what's going on. The white men who don't have the courage to go kill people have made it clear to the young folks that they need to go kill people. And so we get 16-year-olds and 18-year-olds and 21-year-olds ready to go out and shoot people because of what they've been hearing from their fathers and their grandfathers. You're not born wanting to kill somebody else. Somebody has to help you get there. So when I look at the mess, the question never changes. The question is, God, what do you require of us, of me, really, not even us, of me right now? So in preparing and thinking of preparing and reimagining, I don't care who you are, what color your skin is, skin color's got nothing to do with this. In fact, as a matter of fact, God's not engaged in that whole skin color thing. I hope you know that. You know, we're the ones that made that mess too. We made so many messes with the world we've been given. It's kind of like mind-boggling. I can imagine God wondering sometimes what other person she might do for us to fix it. I can imagine that. But in the meantime, we'll take the little bit of stuff we can understand and try to do the best we can. So if you haven't been thinking about this much, if maybe you've been thinking about it a lot, I haven't had a chance to ask or feel too much about what y'all have been doing. So I don't want to be, presumptuous here. Perhaps you've been on this pathway all the time, but I do know that across this church, the Episcopal Church, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what reparations ought to be. And I'm quite weary of people reducing it to being about money only, because this is not something you can buy your way out of. You cannot buy your way out of the suffering, the denigration, the degradation, the wounding, the results of what has happened because of the ways in which we have treated Black and brown people and continue to treat them, treat us, treat them. And the wounds that white people have that they don't identify well enough, nor quickly enough, and get to work on enough. All of that is out there for us to respond to and take into consideration, and not try to put over here on the table somewhere as racial healing, beloved community, and then we're gonna go to reparations. That's a ridiculous conversation. And actually, I don't even think we really and truly understand what beloved community might look like. Because it could be, there's this funny story about a bunch of folks in the first, second century, whenever Jesus got here, living and sharing everything in common, and being concerned about each other, and making sure that everybody had what they needed. And am I ready to do that? Am I ready to take the person from under the bridge to come to be in my house? And the answer is no. Not yet. I'm not ready to go gather up those folks, bring them to my house, because I've been socialized and worried about whether it's safe and whether the problems and on and on and on. So until then, there's a deficit here in terms of what God can do with me. So my heart and head and the fears and all of the stuff that keep me with living within a certain set of structures have got to be interrogated as I work on how am I really going to reimagine this repair. So I hope you hear clearly what I'm saying. Responsibility sits in front of every single solitary human being that has any capacity to think, be, or that has a nickel. We're all responsible. We're all responsible anyway for ourselves and for getting well. And sometimes I think that gets lost in the mix of the stuff. And as we try to think about how we fix it, we're all responsible to think about how can I fix it day by day by the way in which I live and think and behave. Because it is mystical, my sisters and brothers, but it's not magical. This is a deeply mystical issue of how we are going to be responsible in this empire with all of its brokenness as people who have been dispatched by the God of the universe to do something to bring a new message to this empire. That is a mystical assignment, but it's not magical. And I like to laugh about people sitting in their kitchen hungry, asking God for dinner, but they have a paycheck in their wallet. You should go to the grocery store. You should get up and go look for a remedy. So what is the remedy here? And it starts with being willing to be open, to give up a few things so that everybody can have what they need. And every one of us who has something will be offered that invitation. So if we think about this as being all of our responsibility, and we talk about the government, we talk about this and that. But it boils down to, we're people. We are the people. And we live in this country that we claim believes that the people have something to say and do. So there's something to say and do. I don't care what the structures are like. But we act as to put blame. We point fingers, we blame, we do a whole bunch of things before we can say, well, what can I do? So what can I do? How can I be a person who's actually doing reparations? I run a center that has a $400,000 budget. So I have a responsibility to be careful with what I'm doing, to speak to this issue of making a space for repair to happen. And what's my attitude going to be? What can I do with the power that has been given to me? Every one of us has got some degree of power and influence somewhere. How can you use your power and your influence to help reimagine a world where there is equity? Where little 12-year-old boys don't have to die because they can't get health care, or don't have to die because they've got poor schools, or don't have to die because of a system that has designated them to be canon for the fodder for the cannons that with their names on them, and we designate prison beds for them and cemetery space for them, but we're not willing to designate life space for them. And we have to look at those children, and we have to think about them, and we have to be careful what we say about them and their parents and their situations. So I hope that you are following where I am with this, because I feel very passionate about the necessity to keep this discussion about repairing and compensation and fixing stuff, to keep it in touch with the whole big piece that's got to get done. And to keep saying you don't have the luxury of just picking what you like. There's a couple of institutions that are giving out checks to people because they've identified descendants of slaves. That's all well and good, but I want to know, what are you planning to do when you finish with that? What are you planning to do so that there won't be young Ahmaud Arbery's being shot down in the street like dogs, or Breonna Taylor being killed in her apartment, or George Floyd being murdered in front of us by the state representatives we call police? Can we make a world where those things don't happen? And how is your attitude about the money that you are now distributing to former people whose ancestors were slaves, or Native people, or whatever it is we're talking about, the Indian schools, whatever we're talking about? How does that relate to creating a world where those other things don't happen? And the last time I asked that question to somebody, I got the worst answer I've ever gotten in my life about, if I say too much, you know what I'm talking about, and I probably don't need to do that here. But the thing is, the answer was pitiful, because there was such a big gap between thinking because you gave somebody a couple $1,000 or $100 or whatever it was that people got, and that somehow was fixing this structure out there that is unfair and unwilling to take into consideration the value of the life of the very people that you're supposed to be trying to make compensation for. So, we just don't get to play games about this. I just think we don't get to do that. I think we've got to say, healing is what we're after here. Healing is what we're after. And what is it going to take to get there? It'll take some money, it'll take some lamenting, it'll take some apologizing, it will take people being uncomfortable, it will take people maybe not even liking you. You know, fancy that, somebody might not like you because you took a particular stand. You know, I hear all the time, you know, people telling me, well, if we just could talk about race and much and all this stuff, things could be better. And I'm thinking, you really don't get it, do you? Because it's not that the conversation is the problem, it's the structure that makes it makes it impossible for the conversation to go away. So we can't quit talking about race, we can't quit being racist, we can't quit talking about all of this stuff because you didn't fix it yet. But what can you do individually, personally, in the ways in which you think, the ways in which you behave, that helps to support the collective effort that needs to be happening? Because individuals have responsibility. You know, you can't just say that the church needs to do something. We need to do something. And we need to do it individually. We need to do it in every place we happen to be. If your attitude is that somebody needs to compensate Black and brown people and Native peoples for what has happened to them, then how are you living your life in a way that says that every day you want to have your hands open and share with the folks that pass by you? Because it's the same thing, it's just a bigger picture. You see, how am I willing to be a resource? How will I let you use me? And I think until we start thinking about all of this in ways that connect us more completely as individual human beings, generosity of spirit and heart, when you hear that somebody has messed up, are you willing to be generous and compassionate toward them? Or do you want them to be sent out to be killed, so to speak, you know what I mean, not literally killed, but because all of it is connected. Human beings are connected. And I don't know whether you believe that or not, you don't have to believe it is true. I can't make you believe it, but I want to tell you that we are all connected in the stuff we do to one another and or don't do for one another affects everything. And when we get that straight and we start understanding better how we are empowered by acknowledging that and living into the truth of it, things might actually change. They might. Don't you wonder what will it take to make things really better? And also, don't you wonder what does better really mean? You know, better for who? And what is better? You know, do I need things to be better for me? Or is it the person living under the bridge that I'm talking about? Or the little children that are living in situations that no little children should be living in any society, and especially not an industrialized society. So how brokenhearted are you about all of this stuff? Is it just a matter of naming and accusing and pointing fingers and calling people into accountability? Or is it being brokenhearted because I have so much and I want to be careful to live in a way that makes life better for those who have so little? And I don't always even know how to do that. And some days I make such a mess out of it until it's pitiful, and thank God for grace. So I can get up the next day and look myself in the face and say, well, you know, that was a pretty bad mess you made, but there's another day. My mom used to always say, tomorrow's another day. You know, you get a chance to try again, even though you made a huge mess today. So I've made a mess and been stingy and judgmental and not ready to live as if I believe really that God is in charge of me and my life, and that I can afford to allow people to have what they need if I mess that up, I'll get some more chances. And let's try to stay open to the chances. I don't know, I don't know, you'll get to ask questions and you'll get to ask comments and maybe aren't clear to you. But to repair the things in the first place, repair is even the wrong word, because the stuff doesn't need to be repaired, it needs to be reconstructed. There's so much that needs to be reconstructed, needs to be interrogated and reconstructed. But are we willing for that reconstruction to happen? Do we want, how much do we want to rock the boat? Every one of us has to answer that question for ourselves. You know, I'm 76 years old, so I'm not worried about rocking boats. I don't care. You know? And I've been there a little bit all my life, but it's gotten better. My children worry. They say, "Mom, just don't buy a motorcycle." You know, they worry that this is to be taught. I think you're sounding more radical than they thought I was. And I'm an old lady, so I'm not supposed to sound like that. But I can sound like that. I understand a lot of stuff that you used to understand. And I'm thinking clearer about what really matters. And what really matters is to love every single solitary human being that crosses my path with the best of my ability, and to own my limitations and fears and not pass them on to them. So I don't need to say ugly things about the person living under the bridge because I'm afraid of them and afraid to help them, and they make me feel inadequate because I'm worried about them being there and I can't fix it. So I can talk about them badly because if they would just go away and not be there, then I wouldn't have to have all these feelings. Instead of owning that it's me that has the shortcoming and not them. So and the best I can do today, because I have these shortcomings, is have generosity and heart and spirit. And look them in the eye when I give them my little $2 or $3 and say, bless you. That's the best I can do. And that's about me. It's not about them. You know, I've just been instructed so many times by well-meaning people that I need to quit rolling down my window and giving people money and go freeway entrance. And I just have no intentions of ever not doing that. You know, I'm gonna do that every time I see anybody anywhere. Because it's nothing, it's absolutely nothing. But it's the least little bit that I've got the courage to do today. And I'm gonna do it. And maybe God will give me some more courage if I keep on stepping up to that little bit of courage that I have already. And you're sitting there maybe wondering, how is this related? Do you get how it's related? It's the spirit. It's the spirit of generosity, the spirit of taking personal responsibility that ends up being multiplied that over and over and over to the point that we would be willing to fight like crazy to make sure, as collectively, that everybody has what they need. Everybody is a beloved child of God. Everybody on the planet. And if you don't believe that, then tell me about what is your understanding of God? That God creates some people that God likes better than others, and so what kind of God is that? The God that I understand is a God who has created us all and loves everybody. No matter what you have or don't have, no matter how you sound, no matter what you believe, you are loved as much as me. Now, you know, most days I don't actually like all of that, because there's some days I want to be really pretty special. And there's some folks that I really would prefer God would just choose not to love them actually, and maybe just let them get off the planet. That would be my remedy for them. But in spite of all of that, when I get done with all my little ranting about it and saying whatever I've got to say, I come back to, and God loves them as much as me. So in the light of that, how should I be dealing with people? How should I be thinking of them? And in the light of that understanding, how should I think about preparing or creating a new space. I don't even know that I want to call it repairing. I think I'm going to call it creating space for God to bring the new healing light that can make life possible for people to live into the fullness of what God had in mind when they got sent to the earth. That is the goal. Create that kind of space. That's the goal of beloved community. We can't make beloved community happen. We can create space where God can enter. And then we care about each other differently. You know, I just think that when you talk about folks and think about folks and interact with folks on a daily basis, it tells you about how you're going to do everything else that you do. All of us. And so none of us here is without responsibility. All of us are responsible. I used to teach the Holocaust a lot. I'm a retired professor, and I used to teach the Holocaust, and my students would be so mad at me because they didn't want to think about all that sad stuff. And they were especially mad when I would tell them that we could all be Nazis. We could all be Nazis, just write formulas that we could all be Nazis. But at the end of this amazingly powerful film called Night and Fog, they run through all of the concentration camps and all that stuff, and it's just hard to stand to watch it. And at the end, everybody says they're not responsible. Nazi officers, all kinds of people, nobody's responsible. The question that the film ends with, who is responsible? Who is responsible? So in your sphere, in your church, in your community, in your diocese, in this country, who is responsible? And what is your responsibility? Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor want to know if we are willing to see how our saying yes to what we are responsible to get done could help make sure that repeating what was done to them. But you know what has happened already? We have killed, the police have killed 1,000 people since before. And you don't know who most of them are, do you? Because we didn't bother to talk about it. Because that's how we do stuff. So it's that kind of stuff that we've got to put into this conversation and work on and think about as we try to think about how are we going to move forward. Absolute possibilities for everybody to be free people. But we do need to know whether or not we want everybody to be free. Do we want everybody to be equal? Do you want everybody to have what you got? Or do you want to say, well, I worked really hard and they didn't work hard, so they don't need to get it? That attitude is about not wanting reparations, you know. And that attitude is across this country and across the church. How many times have I heard it? I've worked hard for everything I got, nobody gave me. That's just nonsense. You know, you were born here and somebody took care of you. Somebody gave you a lot, you know. So we should stop now for people to be able to say something.
Yeah, please say, well, let's just give a hand for all of Just there's so much to you, and thank you for letting it spill over in the ways that it has so beautifully. So I know that our panelists have some thoughts. So what we're going to do is give you all a chance to respond from your vantage points. As you respond, think about sort of what does this have to do with the church? In a church, we're having a conversation and advising. Working with the task force to think about what is repair. What does this have to do with faith? So as you're responding to the amazing, powerful words about that in mind, we'll give you you all a chance to respond. We'll ask you one more question, and then we'll take a few questions from you all. So we'll start, whoever wants to start, and we'll just go. You don't have one to start?
Doesn't?
Okay. Do you want to give it a start? Sure. Thank you.
I just want to thank you for what you said. I'm sitting here, I just want to scream. I just want to have a final scream because I really don't want anyone from anybody. I just want folks to leave me the hell alone. Okay? I went to a funeral this morning, and I have to admit, the minister was rather brave because he didn't bring up the murders in Buffalo. And he said, as he was talking about that, he looked down, and in the second pew, there was a mother and a little boy. The little boy asked his mother, the little boy's 7 years old, and the little boy asked his mother, "Mommy, why do they hate me so much?" Little black child, why do they hate me so much? I realized that when I was coming up, there was discrimination, there was racism. I remember when all the people were black, all H Street, all the way over, all the way across the Anacostia was black. And I knew there was discrimination, but my parents kind of hid it from me. We didn't have tweets and internet. Because our children are traumatized. What I want to fix are traumatized children because they will be traumatized adults. And so somehow, when we talk about, I want somebody to really answer, what are we repairing? What are we repairing, and what are we willing to risk? Dr. King said he wanted to know by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. We've got 70-year-olds, 50 years later, asking, "Mommy, why do they hate me so much?" And how do we answer that? And when we talk about the church, I'm going to put it on the church, everybody, I'm going to put it on the church. Because the church is full of Jesus' hands and feet. And so, what are all his hands and feet going to do? And a lot of times, we talk about, okay, we are working people, we are simple people, and we have to have that excuse to not to do anything. We're going to wait on the Lord. As opposed to actually saying, what are we going to risk to fix this mess for the children? For the children. Personally, I just want to be able to go to the grocery store and come out alive. That's it. Other folks don't worry about going to the grocery store or going to the doctor and having the doctor believe that I really have this pain. They're not gonna worry about going to the bank and getting a loan, or that I have money for a house, but I can't get the house because it's in the wrong neighborhood. Or that I carry literally 4 badges in case I'm stopped by the police. Like, which one do you want? And so I want us to really have a deep conversation about what's wrong in the church. Because there are some Episcopal churches I cannot go in and be welcomed. I'm just saying. There's some, and if the church wanted to fix this, it would have been fixed. There's some scripture that says, I can do anything. Something like that, right? Right? I can do anything. And Christ strengthens me, right? Do we really believe that? And so, for you to be here and to have this conversation and that we really talking truth. And it's not about throwing money. Throwing money is easy. It's good. But it's really fixing what's wrong, but we have to have a conversation about what is really wrong. Like, what is it that when people look at me, they cannot tolerate me, they cannot stand me, they don't want to sit beside me. Tell me what it is. Tell me what it is. And tell the children what it is. Because if we have traumatized children, we have traumatized adults, and this society is going to be even more screwed up than it is. And so we can either start fixing it now, or 50 years from now, those traumatized kids will be sitting up on the stage talking about the same crap. See, if they don't shut up. They don't shut up. And I wrote this on Facebook. If I had the power in the church, I said, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna fix this. And if this upsets you, then leave the church. Go someplace else. You're not welcome here. You're not welcome here. Go find a church where you can be your racist self and let them fix you. But if you can't be a part of this, then leave. As opposed to, oh, no, we're hospitals and people. Well, sometimes people die in hospitals, so go. And so we have this thing for the next year, this is going to be our focus. And if you don't like it, leave. And if we end up, after a year, with only 12 committed people, that's one more than Jesus ended up with that year, right?
That's right.
Until they added the 12 come back. If we end up with only 12 people who are committed to being like Jesus, we'll be thankful for that. But if we can't do this, then the church is irrelevant. The church is useless. There are other things to do. And we don't shut up.
Well, it's a very, very hard act to follow. But we'll try. Well, you know, at age 62, I've seen so much history unfold in the United States of America, and then also consequently around the world. And I actually remember the day that John F. Kennedy was shot. And then, of course, we see it on the Zapruder film periodically. And what died that day was not just the man, but the ideals that he espoused, the ideals of equality of access, fairness, justice. And then they killed Martin Luther King, who stood for the same things. And he was speaking the truth for Satyagraha of Mahatma Gandhi. And then they killed Bobby Kennedy. And they killed these people because they spoke truth. Nobody likes the truth to speak. So here we are at the 11th hour. Personally, as an attorney and an observer and a minister, I consider politics to be a barometer of the level of spiritual attainment of a society. And so we're passing through the ugly adolescent stage, and we can only hope to come out on the back end, beginning the stage of enlightenment. There are several steps to it. But before we get there, to answer the question, what are we willing to give up? We have to give up, and I've been on some of the world's biggest corporate cases in banking and finance and the food industry. Who knew that the Heinz Corporation owns and controls 85% of the world's food, from harvest to distribution? I didn't know it before I started the case, but I know it now. And in the process of deciding who harvests that, who gets paid the contracts to harvest, how many hands are worn thin, bloody, by picking things that can't be harvested by machine. So what we're ready to give up is the exploitation of people who don't have the privilege. Exploitation would be the first on my list. And not just giving it up as a product of monetization of people, but giving it up from the place of the heart. Because what happens when we reach the state of enlightenment is that we are actually physically able to see the divine spark in each and every person. We look at each person and say, oh my God, you're so beautiful. Or, oh wow, you're so brilliant. You can feel it, you can see it. And when you embrace people in a heart-to-heart connection, you'll be surprised at what you're willing to do on their behalf. See, one of the things about being an interfaith minister is that I have had a first-person experience with the divine, and I'm sure everybody on the stage has as well. And so you look at people according to their need, and you say to yourself, how can I serve them? So it was easy for Jesus to say, I can see that you don't have eyesight. Let me scoop up some earth and rub it on your eyes, and boom, the man could see. Or when he healed the leper, and I'm not preaching here, I'm sorry. But I want us to go closer, deeper into the spirit, because once we go into the spirit of God, a lot of things are going to change. We want to let go of the power and the hierarchies, because hierarchies are a human construct, and they're constructed around dominance. But what about equality? What about that moment when you say, as I was coming in, a gentleman sitting on the stoop across the street said, hey, Peter, what do you have going on today? And you answered him with so much love and respect. Which is why when I came in, I just had to tell him, you're doing beautiful things. And so it's that dedication to love. You heal the sick, you restore sight, you feed the poor. And as we do that and we decide that that's going to be our motive as a collective, we will see a conversion of the entire country. And so being ready to do that, ready to give up our prestige and our status and our degrees. I made Hazel laugh when I was telling her my name. I was like, those are just letters. I'm just your name. But what happens when we decide to walk the path of Christ? Because he was the one who said, this stuff you see me do, you're going to do greater because I go to the Father. We give the example of the time when he walked to go raise Lazarus from the dead. He waited 4 days after Mary and Martha went to tell him, please come and see them, begging him. But his divine guidance was, no, I'm going to wait, knowing that Lazarus would be dead by the time. Now, as a human part of his divine self, he probably wanted to run to his friend because he knew he had the power to restore his life. But he waited, and what he said as he was walking with God, I know you hear me, you always hear me. And so what I'm asking people to do right now is to talk to God unceasingly. Because I can tell you, I was in Africa in January 2019 and found myself in the throne room of the king of Sabalu in Benin. And all I really could tell him was that the exchange of people for money, the slavery that has ensued in the violence, because it's not just physical savagery, it's savagery of the spirit. How do we release that? How do we not need that anymore? What is that little thing inside of us that gets a thrill and say, well, you know, it's just those people. No, it's all of us. Because God is one gigantic, beautiful, exquisitely loving entity, and each of us is an extension of that. So just opening the question of how do I allow my heart to be bigger and to spread more love, even if I never get to meet you in person, you will feel the love and speak love into people rather than criticism, rather than denial, rather than rejection. Find the divine spark in groups of people, wherever they are in the world. And when you speak it and you feel it, it will come back to you, because that's the law of reciprocity. Jesus said, whatever you sow, you'll also reap. And the church is responsible, not just for calculating the ongoing damages that are due each individual, but the church is responsible for a blanket condemnation of slavery and all of its residuals, and we're still experiencing the residuals every day.
This is the last one to talk. I'm gonna talk about one. I will say up front, yeah, I think you had this conversation with her. My wife actually 100% agrees with respect. She's not on check with anybody that's really left alone. And I very much agree with what you said, Dr. Meeks. There is no pain for the blood. It's just impossible. I also think the money matters. And the way I think about it is when we're talking about reparations, is that financial remuneration, transfer of wealth and assets is necessary but insufficient, dramatically insufficient for any project for which we're doing. I think it's necessary because, regarding that question that you asked, and you asked repeatedly, why is it safety? Well, I think historically, I would say, it started with greed. White people didn't come out and decided they hated black people. They went and they said, we want free labor. And underneath it, and I suspect still, I have the sense that every white person in this country, on some level, understands their unjust privilege, and also understands that it comes at the expense of the unjust disadvantage of black and brown folks. There's like a tickling discomfort there. So at the first stage, because my people wanted to profit, and they wanted, for instance, to steal indigenous people's lands, which they did, and they wanted to steal black people's bodies and free labor, which they did, there's clearly that awareness on some level of the gross injustice and the gross immorality of what they were up to. Right? You see how, like, if you read Thomas Jefferson's writings, the way he's constantly trying to make excuse for what he's engaged in, he clearly understands the immorality of it. And then they have to do this process of developing rationalizations of why this was acceptable. There was a process of propaganda when you ask the question of where the church did. The church was the principal pervade that said that black people were somehow following the emancipation. We created a theology that said that black people were inherently dangerous, therefore had to be policed, had to be imprisoned in jail. So that's the fundamental piece about it. That's where we should follow. And there was this in the midst of it, all of it. This piling up of wealth. I think there's a good reason the book says a lot of money is the root of all evil, and that's where hate comes from. There's justification for it, but I think it's so deeply, hundreds of years of education in that, it's become automatic, and there's not even a sense of that connection anymore, but it's still very permanent. So I think that it has to be addressed in the challenge. Fix the problem. And we see this 10 to 1 wealth gap, which has implications that she made these documents. All those pieces are we know from historical records that many of our church buildings were built with the labor of enslaved persons. So there's this process of building up wealth, and this process of stealing of wealth, which the churches still hold in our real estate and other property assets. So I think that there is no pain for the blood, but there is an accounting that's necessary of the wealth itself. And it certainly won't fix the problem, but I do think that there's a reason that Jesus tells us where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I think one of the big failures has always been that, and it is my deep end, my dread and anxiety about this work, is that at any point that it comes to a place of being kind of like a weregilt for the church or like people or whatever sign off a check and say we did it, it's done. But I do think there's a thing that goes on, we can see it in our own lives, I see it in my life. We put money, like the sacrificial thing, like we really give big amounts from whatever our personal assets are, towards things that matter to us. And having given the money, those things matter to us because we're feeling invested in them. You mentioned the sense, Dr. Meeks, about that. What are we really willing to sacrifice? And I think you're actually very well be right. I mean, maybe a new conversation because the church and white people might just be completely uninterested in really actually making the payment necessary. So they just become talking. The sacrificial level would be, like essentially for the church and one folk to transfer over 10% of total assets, including real estate. We get you towards that like wealth equity level. I don't think you're right. I think you're right. I think most of us, white folks, are not ready to have that conversation. Like most of the white folks have got how much they put away to retirement in a home that, $500,000 home that they paid off 60%. I'm not interested in thinking about the what's required is when I say like $50,000 for you, average white American, or not healthy person for you. And it certainly wouldn't heal the breach. But I also think if we're not taking that piece seriously, then we are still at the level of, as you were saying, playing. Until we really take that piece seriously. So, here you asked if we're going to ask Washington. I think the first piece right now is really get that piece of the truth telling out, to acknowledge what our history is. Not only that broad history of diocese, but at the local level, we've got these 17 congregations that are investigating their own history. But I am definitely struck by the peaceful food you brought, of that sense of current, ongoing fear and dread, and very real sense of the lack of danger and the lack of safety. So I feel that, and I hear that, and I don't think we have yet found the will to change that. Scared of the right. We're told we could. We could have cleaned house on this at any point during the station's 400-year history. Here we are on stage again. And yes, the question is, 40 years from now, how will we be hosting another close to like this and haven't seen very little change? I would not like to see that.
Okay, listen, y'all. When we talk about these things, the time can just get away from us. So if you are someone who just has to get out of here at 6, that's your business. We invite you to stay in conversation. I want y'all to think about the 1 or 2 words, a quick sentence in response to, I'm going to read a little quote from a book and ask you a question. And then if there are a few folks who have questions, you can start to form along this side over here. So this statement comes from a book called The Production of Space by a French philosopher whose name I get Henry something. But he says a revolution that does not produce a new space has not realized its full potential. Indeed, it has failed and it has not changed life itself, but has merely changed ideological superstructures, institutions, or political apparatuses. A social transformation, to be truly revolutionary in character, must manifest a creative capacity and its effects on daily life, on language, and on space. So, panelists, Dr. Mitchell, in one quick little phrase, what new space do we need to make the very layered nature, like we all talking about, the personal, the structural nature? What new space do we need to make the nature of reparations possible? What new space? If you have a question, form here and speak to this point. Peter, maybe you go first and then we'll go back around that way. Okay, come on, get moving.
I would say for this gathering, we would need a church that's actually going to be church, that's actually, which our history, I don't know if we've ever had a consistency, but a church that's going to honestly wrestle with the charge Jesus gives us to know the truth and trust the truth in the history, to know the full truth, to acknowledge the full events, and then to actually trust, if you're reminding us to trust, that we can't do all things through Christ who strengthens us, and decide that we actually want to do that. I don't think the church writ large has ever been that. At least, I mean, I don't know, that's at least since the first disciples, but I think that's what would be necessary.
I have two. One is the restructuring or dismantling of the global financial systems and the weapons and gun industry. It's an absolute one. And then the other is to just love them.
Well, it's not rocket science. Jesus already told us what to do. I think the church needs to get about doing it. And stop debating with Jesus and stop telling priests to preach Jesus because they're being political and a whole bunch of other nonsense that we say on Sunday morning after we converse or when we don't hear. I would like to see the church be the place that became the new reimagined way to be in the world, because I think, and I mean all churches, but the Episcopal Church is the one that I've got the most connection to. Just go back and look at the stuff that Jesus did and see if we can't live like that. That to me would be something for the church to do, because we are in a free country. We can do that. Free to. Free enough to do that if we really want to. So I want the church to stop throwing stones and stand up to the plate.
For me, it goes back to the risk, creating safe space to risk. Jesus risked it all. Gandhi risked it all. King, Obama, Harriet would have risked it all, she carried it done. But creating that space where you tell the truth, because telling the truth involves a risk. Right? Preaching the truth involves a risk, but it's okay. We're going to have to risk. You don't gain anything without risking something. And sometimes you have to risk it all to get just a little measure of what you want. So it goes back to what are we willing to risk?
I think somebody want to give, please. Hi. You let us know who you are.
Hello, my name is Gwendolyn Carter, and I don't think I really have a question. I mostly have an observation. Can you hear me? Okay, can you? I'm Gwendolyn Carter. You should hear me?
Yes.
Holler. Okay, I participated in the civil rights movement. And the one thing that always stood out to me was that it was, I think, ecumenical in the sense that all the churches were involved. And I think, as I look at what is happening today, that's what I don't see. I think that we have to have that. You know, we can't, this room, well, everything that is being said today is real and it is happening. But we're not going to be able to do it in this room. We have to do it with all the churches, all the people involved. And I appreciate so much what you have to say, you know, thank you, and thank you for letting me be here and hear this. I'm Catholic, I'm over in St. Augustine's over in Northwest. But I just think that if we're gonna do the things that we're talking about, and this is individual, all of us have to do it collectively, but we have to have the leadership of the church, of all the churches.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts from others out here? You have to. Yeah, we're good.
People can hear on tendency to be a little soft, but first of all, thank you all. I guess I would ask the question, what prevents the church from creating the spaces to have these discussions? We're having this discussion at 4:30 on Saturday, and we'll have our people here. But this isn't happening even once a year in most churches. I've been to enough churches to know that it seems pastoral to white people and non-pastoral to everyone else. The assumption is pastoral is all we do. This is prophetic messaging. If you don't create the space, what would you actually say would help to create the space to have these discussions, especially in white congregations?
I think the same thing that Reverend Gill just said. The people who are needing, you know, I'm really on to the seminaries and the Episcopal Church to start teaching the folks that you're sending out to be leaders to have a little bit of courage and maybe a thimble for faith. Because it takes courage and faith to tell the truth you need to tell and take a chance on somebody getting mad and getting up and walking out and not coming back or paying their pledge. We get too caught up in being afraid of the losses. And so just until we quit hedging our bets around how much is it gonna cost me and am I willing to pay it, then we're gonna keep on doing what we're doing. We're gonna play it safe. And as long as we play it safe, we're gonna end up where we are. You know, I like to think about what's the worst thing that can happen to me if I tell this piece of truth, and can I live with it? And if I can, then let me go tell this truth. You know, I'm preaching in the morning at the Washington National Cathedral, and I sat with myself and said, somebody can walk in the back and shoot you. That's the worst thing that can happen. They're probably not going to. And if I really thought they were, I might decide to stay home. But I'm going to do it. And if I get shot, I'll be dead. But if I'm not shot, I'll tell the best truth I can tell.
Yes.
So can we be willing as people of faith to trust maybe that God does not lie? That to me is, you know, we got too many people that need to crawl from underneath the bed and find some courage so that we can tell the truth, because people can be made free if they're not hearing how to get into freedom. And you know, I know priests all over this country that have to worry about being accused of being political and because they're telling the truth. And so, you know, folks need to be, maybe the people in the pew need to be invited to read the New Testament. I don't know. Read that, those chapters and understood what they meant, you would understand that whatever the priest is saying is less radical than what Jesus said. You know, so I mean, we're so antsy about somebody's gonna make me feel bad. I mean, we're actually passing down the laws in this country to say we don't want people to know the truth because the truth will make you feel bad. But we're doing the same thing in the church. We just aren't We just aren't owning it. And we need to start telling that truth. We need to quit talking out of both sides of our mouths and tell the truth and take our chances. God might just keep on looking after you.
You know, it's fairly simple. Do we worship the institution or do we follow Jesus?
Yeah.
That's.
One piece, which is that the governmental laws regarding nonprofits constrict the topics that pastors and religious people can talk about to maintain their nonprofit status. And it becomes very problematic at a certain point where people are forced to refrain from speaking things that need to be talked about because they're afraid that their finances will get affected. And then the other piece is just that using power ethically is the subtext of that conversation. An ethical leader always tells the truth and creates space for people to be whoever they are.
But you know, we've got a long ways to go before we lose nonprofit status.
Gospel, we got no problem.
Another thing I want to add is that, like, clearly, something you say is actually not working for the Episcopal Church. And certainly, you have to ask yourself, like, what are you scared of losing?
I'm just, we could go on and on. And in fact, this is just one of many conversations that the diocese will be having on this topic of reparations. Thank you so much to the board of you for engaging us so beautifully and for all of you being here. And as was shared, I think, I'm sorry for your name, but the work is not happening in this room. The work happens in the conversations you're gonna have with your friends and your colleagues, how you're gonna change, where you shop, where you look at all of these things that we have been invited into. And so I'm not a deacon, but there is a deacon, and we're Sue. Sue's up in here, so actually there's some things, like, all the things. But I am just so grateful for all that has been shared. We invite you to stay in conversation with us in the diocese. We'll be having a reparations 101 education aspect for our School of Christian Faith and Leadership. We'll be having a symposium on October 1st to really shed light on all that's been found through the research that the Reparations Task Force has undertaken that will serve as a catalyst for the way we move forward as a diocese, and because of the prominence of the diocese, the way that this area moves forward on this conversation of reparations. So thank you all. Thank you to our panelists and our guests. Have some water on the way out. Thank you again to Calvary for being gracious hosts. If you need anything on the way out, let us know. All right, y'all. Be safe, be well. Those are reparations. remember when it's, reparations. Thank you so much for joining. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm so glad. Oh, okay, great. I'm grateful. Thank you so much for being I'm so glad you know the word of our name. I'm so glad y'all be part of it. Thank you. And I'll start the live stream. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Thank you all for joining today's conversation. We will